We are very pleased to have in our next excellent panel Guadalupe Correa-Cabreras, who's an associate professor at the School of Policy and Government, Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason, Global Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center, and non-resident scholar, Baker Institute's Mexico Center from Rice University. And she's speaking about a border support network, asylum seekers, migrant caravans, and counterinsurgency on the two Mexico borders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I changed a little bit the title to make it more understandable when I was writing my paper. So now I am going to talk about American activism, counterinsurgency, and geopolitics of border security. The geopolitical part is very important here. And I'm going to start by saying that this is probably and perceived as a controversial issue, but the attempt to do this type of research does not get politicized, and I am not taking on this project for ideological motivations or for political motivations. I just want to understand what is behind mass mobilizations and protest movements against the current United States administration, how identity politics has played out a very important role, moving forces that I didn't see before. I consider myself a person who starts a project, and this project lasts for like 10 years, and this is the beginning of a different approach that I'm taking to my own research. And this is the beginning of a new book that I'm going to write on counterinsurgency and new social movements. Social movements like the ones that we observed starting in Standing Rock, this type of mobilizations utilizing identity politics and have specific effects. Genuine movements that I am saying, or I am observing, that get infiltrated by different political forces, and the initial motivations of these groups or the initial objectives get transformed, and in the end the result is not as positive as we would have observed. And this is something that I have been observing, and movements of similar actors and similar dynamics taking place. And I can think of the mobilizations that we are seeing right now in Hawaii, the one what we observe in Standing Rock. I'm going to talk about, in particular, migrant caravans, and in particular what happened last year by the end of the year in the San Isidro port of entry in the city of Tijuana, trying to get to San Diego, and other movements that right now we are observing here in the hemisphere. And I'm thinking about Puerto Rico, I'm thinking about what has been happening in Ecuador, and many other movements that we are going to be seeing. And I'm thinking about Hong Kong in particular, because we don't know what is really moving what side. And we're observing right now protesters, anti-fascist groups, Antifas, and this new type of language. This is what I have figured out while I saw these caravans coming and the confrontation that took place at the San Isidro port of entry. And I tried to understand what was going on. And we do have a structural issue and a problem, a human problem that some of us who have studied migration have seen. Asylum seekers and mass movements of migrants south of this hemisphere, and now they are coming through the south, but coming from other countries, countries in Africa that have been living very complicated situations, civil war. I'm thinking about South Sudan, Cameroon, Angola, Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. We're now observing them coming through Mexico and applying for asylum, utilizing Mexico as a route, but starting in not only Mexico, but from Brazil, and they going and moving up. This is something that's not necessarily connected to this. What I'm talking about when I was referring to Hong Kong or Hawaii or Puerto Rico. But the interesting part here is when I mean, and I'm probably trying to explain a lot. As I said, please forgive me because it's the start of a project that will take probably several years. Counterinsurgency and social movements. So let me. Okay, also I want to say that this is a project that's not only, that I'm not the only person. This paper has the contribution of other 3 people that have been collaborating with me. This is the utilization of social network analysis, and these tools are, I'm familiar with them, but I cannot apply them, and I don't understand the statistical part behind this, the creation of algorithms to understand how people connect. And I will try to explain a little bit of how we constructed our databases. These databases have been kept since the beginning of Standing Rock, and the first months of Standing Rock, in August 2016 till today. And so this database or communications between actors that supported or supported Standing Rock and were important, supporting and advertising and communicating what was happening in Standing Rock in a new era of influencers, in a new era where everybody tapes themselves, and communications and coverage of events, particular social movements, utilizing drones and all that. Everything started in Standing Rock, and this is being used in other types of social movements. It's important. So I paired with a person when I was trying to figure out what was happening in San Isidro when a month after the Caravan started in San Pedro Sula, that I also didn't understand how many people and the new journalists and the new forms to cover a Caravan, from the air, from everywhere. We could see those movements. These are the names of my collaborators, statisticians and scientists, mainly engineers, know how to do this, and a person who was in Standing Rock and was covering Standing Rock and helped me to understand what about the spectacle and how people from Hollywood and how influencers work and everything. So she's a radio host in North Dakota and Minnesota, Fargo, Moorhead zone, which is a border. So she understands how borders work internally, and it's an important component of this research team. We're part of a grant, an eager grant from the National Science Foundation to understand criminal networks. Through convergence. Convergence is the utilization or the collaboration between people in STEM and people in the social sciences to try to dismantle criminal networks. And this grant, we are part of one team to study at the world level organ trafficking. But this project has other 6 projects to study human trafficking networks, drug smuggling networks, armed trafficking, these criminal networks. So we're a group of people that are trying to get together from different areas. So I want to recognize the work of my colleagues that made this beginning of the study possible. So I will tell you how I was able to meet this person, because when the Caravan arrived to San Isidro, I started seeing American activists very active, and the coverage was like not Mexican or not from Central America, and they accompanied the Caravan since San Pedro Sula, and it was just very, very interesting. I was, who's these people? I don't understand who these people are. And interestingly enough, there was somebody else who was looking at the same people that I was looking at. And I started to document their names, and I tried to see who they were, and then I met these people who was doing the same work, but from Fargo, from Minnesota. So, from North Dakota and Minnesota. And then, we started to exchange information, and it was interesting that it seemed that this movement was connected to a phenomenon that I have been studied about immigration and about the human problem of migration, of asylum, of bad conditions in Central America, but it got very close to American politics and to an issue that's happening in America, which is electoral and political in many ways. So we started to try to see who these people were, but she was already collecting data with other people in Florida and in California. And so, connections, so how people connect to each other. And we saw that some of the people that were covering and supporting and organizing the camps at Standing Rock were in San Diego and Tijuana border, operating for a couple of years. And this all started when Donald Trump started his campaign and arrived to power in the United States. So I was fascinated, and I was troubled by the fact that our activists, because the caravans were supported by a group that is, activism is, activism and pseudo-activism. And when I talk about pseudo-activism, I talk about those that are not doing the work with a humanitarian objective, but are organizing or are providing the services to vulnerable populations for money or for prestige or for whatever reason. So that's the difference, right? So I see that the Mexican activists and pseudo-activists that were were providing providing support to migrants and to asylum seekers, were connected to these groups suddenly, and they seem to operate in a way to support the movement of people, right? Unprecedented. And then the activists of Standing Rock were, when at the San Isidro port of entry, there was a confrontation with the authorities, and this is probably what we're going to see, what we saw in Hong Kong, and that probably we're going to see next year at different parts of the border. And they are putting camps right now. Floresville, Texas, the Butterfly Center, groups that were connected to Standing Rock, and to environmental movements and indigenous movements, which are legitimate in nature. And I understand from Randy's presentation the concern and the history behind borders and behind these vulnerable populations, or populations that have been displaced. However, the utilization of these themes have cost today 5 minutes. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Okay, great. I'm like, I want to show you the networks. Okay. I'm sorry. It's this type of research is very. I don't have like the points very well studied, because it's okay. So, let me see. Okay. So, and that's why I'm calling the New Directions at the Border, because it's a new direction to study border issues and to study social movements and to study what's happening at borders. That's something important. Okay, so, and I also talk about, I conclude through the analysis of new forms of imperialism, because I see that our activists, to some extent, were moved and mobilized by activists that were American and that had connections to American politicians, and that was connected to American elections. And so I call it imperialism, because our activists have been, mobilized by American activists. And that's something that makes me a little bit concerned. By utilization, the society of the spectacle, and utilization of all these new media tools, to move and to present, what I'm saying with the drones, with the influencers. So our network is on trying to understand all these type of actors. So look at the images. And who was? I have a story. If one time, I will tell you the story of this famous photograph of Maria Mesa and the gas and the lacrimogenous gas, the tear gas. Sorry, I'm speaking Spanish, and how that photograph was taken. And the same thing, the tear gas and the colors and all that are now being applied to other movements, even in Mexico City, with the feminist movement being infiltrated by Antifas or anarchist groups. Some of the ones who were there, exactly that they mobilizing and and moving people to just climb to the other side, where some are connected to Portland movements, to movements, Antifa movements in Portland, Oregon, that were also in Standing Rock. So these are the images of the migrant caravans, and I can see, well, these are the activists and pseudo-activists that move caravans, and this is Standing Rock. You know, the utilization of images. That's why I'm calling about the society of the spectacle, and I'm trying to understand these ways of looking at the society through the work of Guy Debord. So it's interesting the part of the imperialism, because it all, I mean, the activists that were in Tijuana, that have been operating along the border, supporting movements to protest against the construction of the wall, progressive movements in appearance, they presented their work at the Antioch College. And they were looking for the involvement of more volunteers, and they explained how it works. So it was very interesting for me to get that and to capture the work, because they themselves explain us how they work. And it all happened, and this is what I'm talking about, imperialism, because they talked about the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. And very soon it will be a movie presented, The Eagle and the Condor, of how the eagle, like the indigenous groups from North America, get with the condor, the indigenous groups from South America, and they are going to be, there was this prophecy of a transformation of how the people in the South are going to be helped by the people in the North. And they themselves, you know, with Standing Rock and many indigenous groups or pseudo-activists of Standing Rock started to support and created this border support network. Now it's called the Border Support Network, and it started with these movements to fight ICE, like abolish ICE, a hashtag abolish ICE, change its name to Asylum Seeker Caravan Support Network. Then it changed to Caravan Support Network, and now that's the Border Support Network, and it has to do with the creation of what they call villages of resistance. So and these villages of resistance have started to operate, and these are the groups. I'm sorry, I will not have a lot of time to explain that, but I just wanted to. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to continue. These are we try to, from that understanding, and capture the main people who were both at Standing Rock and were in Tijuana. Most of them are Americans. So our groups of activists and pseudo-activists that have been accompanying migrants are not here because these are the guys who we think by doing all this work with people who were in Standing Rock, or I mean I cover these things every day to see how they are connected. All this is being captured by the networks, but this we created in classified actors, and I mean some of them are the ones who are the minds behind that they represent all these groups, the Border Support Network, that they're the founding ones, the ones who look for the support for vulnerable populations, the indigenous movement, the environmental movement, migrant movements, and they get the funding, and they are all Americans. And the messengers and the influencers are connected to political campaigns. It's Bernie Sanders and progressive movements, progressive political movements in the United States. It's interesting because there's a political fight. There's no good and bad people here. We're talking about politicians that want to get power. It's not that I'm talking about Bernie Sanders being, no, I'm not saying that Bernie Sanders is behind that, but people that are supporting the campaign of Bernie Sanders. We have to understand that this is not a thing of good and bad, but we know that there are so many people that are arriving at the border and get stuck at the border. I mean, some of them continue, but many of them don't. And in the way, many people are dying, and this is why also motivated me to understand why so many people are trying to make it. And we have a structural component, and I don't deny that there's a structural component, that people are really not being able to survive in the situations where they are at. And there are many other, I mean, Jen and myself were talking about that. I'm not saying that. I just wanted to mention that. Another thing is, this is a matrix to construct the initial, we have a very big database of many of the actors, and what social networks do is it captures who are the important ones and what is the relationship in the network. It's not, I don't have enough time to probably explain the complexities of this methodology, but every single number in this matrix, how we constructed the matrix of 21 key actors of Standing Rock and the Caravans, is supported by communications that are open source in the social media, mainly Facebook, because the Border Support Network and the people of the North Dakota Access Pipeline, the protests in Standing Rock, were communicating mainly through Facebook, also to Twitter and through Instagram. But there are also mentions in the media, formal media and informal media. So every single number here is supported by one interaction. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about the interactions, but the matrix are, and the type of the networks. This is an awaited integrated network. I don't have a lot of time to explain that, but it is very interesting that this just one network explains who is behind this and what is the connection between the density of these networks, and it has 0.74% of density, which means that these people are communicating, these people that apparently have nothing to do with caravans, but that were in Standing Rock are definitely very, very connected. And also, like networks, network analysis generate communities. And these communities, we have people here like Francis Fisher, Winnie Wong, and Linda Thursur, how movements, progressive movements that are funded by specific philanthropists have, this is also connected to the movement, the Women's March, the protests in Wall Street, hashtag, Occupy Wall Street, all these protest movements. So people are connected, and we're communicating about the caravan. What I'm trying to understand is who's participating here, and that's why I talk a little bit about a sort of imperialism, because our condors, our peoples, have been utilized also as a political tool by groups that are having like a political game here in the United States, and it's also the existence of this network allows us to pose some hypothesis, because people say that the environmental movement, Greta Thunberg, all of these people are connected to those movements too. It's very important and very interesting to see that. They say like Soros is behind the caravan, Soros is behind Greta Thunberg, but there are connections between those groups and between the groups that are receiving money from Open Society and things like that. So this is just a hypothesis, but we need to test those hypotheses that connect the groups that are involved. We have 3 big databases, and we have a lot of information, and we're collecting information to try to see over the actors. Okay, the networks. If somebody is an activist, that does not mean that they're going to appear in our network, because probably they are doing work with migrants. But this is not a network that police do just to blame someone. But the network will show who is producing the information. These 2 networks that I showed, one is an unweighted and one is a weighted matrix. So one of these matrix measure who's sending messages, who's not necessarily connecting to the other one, and they are different. Some of them are generating information, and others are communicating. So this is an important part of the work. It might be the fact that networks, all these groups are opportunistic. So I've been criticized a lot for kind of posing or proposing that this is moved. It might be the fact that these pseudo-activists or these groups that are moving, these professional activists, as I call them, or pseudo-activists, are just, doing it without any motive, and are just getting money. But it seems to me that this has to do more with politics, and this has to do also the Standing Rock people and the indigenous groups like the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe that is, creating camps and is very active. It's not a recognized it's not recognized tribe, but they are also connected to protest movements against energy projects, which I'm against, like these companies that are extractive in nature, damage the environment, and exploit our workers, right? But it's interesting how they act for some companies and not for other companies. It's also interesting to see how Standing Rock and how some people could allege that the construction of a pipeline is a bad thing, but it also benefits those who were transporting or are transporting hydrocarbons through railroad. It's like Warren Buffett versus energy transfer partner, and I forgot his name, but it's Kelsey Warren versus Warren Buffett. So one benefits and the other not. It's also interesting to see how some of these professional organizers that are protesting are protesting against some projects and against not other projects. So this is also very interesting to see how energy projects are behind this, because some of the people that are right now fighting against the wall are alleging that also they have been working with the Sierra Club and groups that are very selective sometimes in the fights that they take. So, it might be opportunistic, it might be more organized, or it might have to do with geopolitics, because also the involvement. That's good. I'm gonna finish this. This is great. Okay, the 5 minutes. The geopolitics and the end of the U.S. hegemony. What's happening today, and this is where the Antifa movement and the Antifa groups, when you destabilize the country and when you have counterinsurgency, what happened in San Isidro is counterinsurgency. The confrontation with the police. So you infiltrate a movement to get the response from the authorities. And I am trying right now to write this piece about psychological operations, how psychops, and how this coverage and the messages also. That's why I'm saying this is probably going to take 10 years to try to understand how the messages are communicated, and how, when you analyze target analysis, and it all are in the manuals of the CIA. So how you infiltrate social movements, you pretend you're part of the movement, you confront the police, and then what is the result? Rules like what we are seeing today, right? It seems that there are all these asylum seekers like getting to the border, and what we are getting, laws and legislation and executive orders and decisions by the Supreme Court that's moved in one direction, that it's definitely doing the opposite, which is difficulting more and more the asylum process in the United States. The same thing happened in Standing Rock. In the end, the pipeline was built. Nothing happened. The camp was dismantled, but rules against protest, the protest against the construction of strategic infrastructure were in place. That happened also in Texas. Thank you to the people who are protesting. So you cannot. There are also a law in North Dakota that you cannot use drones to do those pictures, but it's important also to to document when the police is abusing protesters. So the results in the reality and in the end might be complicated. So I'm going to try to, all these are like hypotheses that are working hypotheses that started with a network, and starting understanding the paper that I'm writing, which is really complicated, trying to understand who these 21 people are and what are the organizations they represent and what their role they represent. So this network is not going to tell us a lot, because 21 actors are not enough to generate the algorithm in the appropriate way, but it has shown us some directions. And something interesting is the Hollywood part of how all these documentaries that have been right now produced about the Caravan, about that it happened in Standing Rock, the Era and the Condor. You're going to probably see this is going to be, I think that the premiere of the movie is next week in New York, the Igor and the Condor. This form of imperialism that I call imperialism. But why? The American activists or activists of the developed nations are, saying that this is a transformation where the great eagle is going to be, finding our condors, and that utilizing also Hollywood stars, utilizing, all these media to establish and to consolidate an imperial system, a capitalist system. Like we're thinking that we are fighting, environment. We are protecting the environment. But let's really see if protests and these movements are really going to do something about the environment. This is just a form to control. So, that's basically, the end of this very short presentation of a paper that's much more complex. Thank you.
Maybe gather a few questions.
Yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to hear more about kind of how you see Guy Debord's work, like the spectacle kind of figuring in, because I think your analysis of kind of these networks and actors are like really compelling. And then how does that kind of connect? I just wanted to hear more. That's all.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry, before, are there other questions we can add on? Yes, in the front. Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah. How did the caravans become a subject of major media coverage in the United States? Any insights to that? I'd appreciate.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question.
There was one in the front row.
Maybe just to ask you to expand a little bit on the attribution of imperialist that you're associating. And so is simply being an indigenous activist in Canada, for example, does that make one an imperialist actor in the sense that you mean?
That's true.
Thank you. I think we'll start with those three now.
Okay. What about the spectacle? I've been working on this idea to try to study very different things, which, it's about the Mexican drug war and the construction of the border fence in 2008, 2009. I worked with some of my colleagues at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, to see how you utilize media and how the government and how powerful actors utilize the media to depict a reality that's not exist, but create perceptions, right? So I start with the work of Guy Debord in the 60s, and then that same idea was applied by Doug Kellner to try to understand what happened with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and border enforcement and the war against terror. The war against terror. How these images were portrayed by the media. What Doug Kellner has done is utilizing this idea of the society of the spectacle to see how the American population felt felt attacked. The God Bless America theme and those. But this is a spectacle. Whether or not it's true that terrorists were going to come from the south, there was a machinery operated and created. Because of that idea, right? And this is the same thing here. That the spectacle of the caravans have a direct impact on two fronts. One is the one that we need to build the wall, but in the end it's just an idea that's going to probably support a political project. One. Second is the idea that you have an enemy, that whether it's or not, some public in the United States think that their invasion is coming, and the invasion is portrayed a very powerful way by the utilization of target analysis and the utilization of counterinsurgency measures to portray that and to see how the police has to push back, right? And this is a very, very light way, but also it's interesting to see how the coverage of these events is done by not only, and I explained that about the utilization of influencers, those who have a lot of followers, who buy followers and who have a lot of followers, and how videos and this video recording of people, then selfies and self-recording, all has been used to explain, to give a message. It's just we live in a world where the president was himself part of the spectacle and know how to use the media and knows how to use the messages through Twitter. For example, we just very recently wrote a paper on how he tried to portray MS-13 and the connection of MS-13 with Central American migration. We got all the tweets that he used in the beginning of his presidency, because MS-13 was a big deal, and how, for example, the Republican candidate for governor of Virginia, Ed Gillespie, had used that idea that MS-13, there were 2,000 members of MS-13 in Fairfax, Virginia, which is one of the richest counties in the country, right? And so we analyze and do the content analysis of the tweets, and it's, even if it's not a reality, it's been explained, and how you utilize this portrayal of people with tattoos and generate fear through these new media, and generate the perception that somebody is going to come and is going to kill you, as they killed the people in Central America, and El Salvador and in Honduras in particular. That's why people are running. So it just generates that feeling, and through that spectacle. In reality, we have the main guy of the spectacle in the United States is Donald Trump. Right? I mean, it's interesting how this is perceived. I mean, this is a work that one of my colleagues at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley did, and I really think it's a very interesting quote. This is utilizing that idea for an understanding the fence. Now it's a wall, but it was then a fence, but we use the word wall. It's a work of 2013. The wall can be, and it's used as an apparatus or a simulacrum to convince Americans that they are secure, whether they are or are not. The border wall is outgrowth of the society of the spectacle, and is a spectacle. In that regard, probably, I tried. I'm gonna discuss it in other terms, but this is just something very, very, very general about the spectacle. So, how the United States media started to cover the caravans. It's a great question, and I also need to do more research on that. But it started to be covered on different fronts. BuzzFeed, it's interesting to see how the formal media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and how blogs and also these new outlets like BuzzFeed, and they have the capacity to, and also, all these alt-right media, right? All the media started to cover it. And it's just like, it's the same thing as when we were talking about WhatsApp, right? It's just very difficult to see when the message was started, or where it was started. It's interesting because I was trying to see who started sending the message in San Pedro Sula when the caravan started in October. Who started? How people knew about the caravan? How they started together and they started to form the caravan in San Pedro Sula. And it's interesting because HTC, a TV station in Honduras, together with Bartolo Fuentes and some people that are not here but will be here very soon, how this politician that has a lot of connections with the president that was ousted by the coup. It's also interesting because here I don't see people that are good or bad. They are actors, and this is the way that I see it. So there was a theory that there was an attempt to destabilize Honduras, and so that's why people left Honduras. And so there was a message that was done through Facebook. So that increased the capacity of getting to more people to join the caravan. But it's interesting because BuzzFeed covered that, and it's probably the only media outlet that covered the fact that Facebook took out that account and it's not going to give any information about that message. So Facebook, the message started in Facebook. And Bartolo Fuentes allegedly was the one who started to talk about the caravan in the media. And BuzzFeed covered the fact that Facebook said, no, he canceled the account and they were not going to give any more information about that. So when you see a lot of people getting together, of course, then what happens? the Washington Post, the New York Times, cover it in a different way. Breitbart and all the alt-right media outlets have been also very, focusing a lot on that. So alternate media, for example, Unicorn Riot and all these platforms that were in Standing Rock, they also have their own base. So it's difficult to know what started what, but what we know is that the Caravan initiated through social media, through Facebook, and the coverage followed an event that started to be massive. So I would probably start by trying to understand how people came together, because this is not organic in nature. People are people do the journey, and we know there are small caravans of people. The caravan is not a new phenomenon. I'm very good friends with the person who started the idea of the caravan, Padre Alejandro Solalinde, and with this idea of the exodus. That is also an interesting thing to talk about, the language that is being utilized today to refer to the Department of Homeland Security, to ICE, all these, this language and these phrases that make us think about the Holocaust. That's why I'm talking about target analysis and about the utilization of this type of language to generate some perception and, in the end, a specific result. This is preliminary, but the utilization, for example, the word exodus, concentration camp, when you refer to detention centers, when detention centers had been like that, and that is part of the construction of the border military-industrial complex. But today, that utilization by the Justice Democrats, the Socialist Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, how they are utilizing that perception of fascism, the anti-fascist groups, the fascist government of the United States, and it generates, sentiments in the public that support or not. But maybe you're trying to support a movement that you think it's valid, but then you end up supporting a different result. So I'm sorry, I did a lot of explanation to tell you that how it started to be covered. Well, because it started to be massive. So we probably want to see how it was generated, right?
Sorry, I'm going to have to, I think, bring us to a close because we have another panelist.
I cannot.
Deal with that last question.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
all right.
great. Sorry. And this, it's very important and very interesting that this research, with this research, I am not alleging that social movements are not genuine and important. And when I'm talking about the environmental movements or the movements that protect indigenous rights, they are not going to appear here. Is sometimes the utilization of identity politics as well by the extreme right or the extreme left that is what moves people. And this is what the manuals of the CIA explain very well in the case of Sendero Luminoso, in the case of Honduras, in the case of Guatemala, how you infiltrate, and this is infiltration, how you infiltrate a caravan, how you infiltrate the support network, the migrant support network. You infiltrated them, and it's very interesting to see how, like Pueblos Sin Fronteras, groups that were part of that Pueblos Sin Fronteras is the group that has been more vocal and has organized this through their connections they had with a part of the Catholic Church that managed the shelters. So, there are people that are doing excellent work, but sometimes this infrastructure, this social infrastructure, is being utilized for political or economic purposes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.